welcome back to another episode of Cherishing Scripture Podcast. We're here again today, the same crew without Jesse, backsliding and decided not to come, but I got Pastor Bailey here, Zach Taylor, and Nathan Waters. How you guys doing?
Doing terrific.
So today we're going to talk about the church, and specifically what the church is going through today. In our society, we have one big church out in California. Even though the whole entire state of California has told them not to have church service, they are still deciding to and have fine after fine after fine. And I kind of just want to talk about, where is it going to go from here? What's next? What will we lose next as a Christian, or what will we lose as a church? So they've already tried taking our buildings away, but that didn't work because they still went outside and had a service.
You guys might find this interesting, you might not. The NCAA has ruled that that the Pac-12 has opened, which means California schools are going to be playing, which means though it's not fans in the stands, you're still talking about probably at least 100 plus between the football players, the quality control, the GAs, all those people in one building. Interesting enough, you're not allowed to have church, but they are allowed to have football practice.
Yep. I think our state's blessed right now more than ever. Our governor just lifted every bit of restrictions that we have so we can have as many people as we want. And he never at one time, correct me if I'm wrong, talked about closing our churches.
No, he didn't. No. Governor Ron DeSantis, he's really been a blessing. First term governor, I've been pretty impressed with him.
Actually, in fact, Jeremy, when the whole thing happened in Hillsborough County with that one pastor, Ron DeSantis came out and spoke against trying to close churches.
Yeah, he did.
So he did the exact opposite.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys this, see what you think. If for some reason later they decide to try and for sure close us as having church, what would we do? Would we go hide underground, or would it be perfectly biblical for us to fight back?
Jeremy, we can't give our plan out in the air, in the open air.
Hopefully there's no liberals or Dimmies listen.
Yeah. Well, historically, the church has had multiple formats and multiple environments for its gatherings. The first century church, we're talking about the church of the book of Acts, they met, the Bible just describes it as publicly and from house to house. So there were public services where there would be larger gatherings, and then there would be smaller gatherings. That would be the house to house type of a gathering, and that might be on the, with the pastor, preacher, and one of the apostles preaching from the rooftop, and then people gathered together around in the courtyard of the home or in the street nearby, whichever was most convenient. So publicly and from house to house was the original setup, and if we had to go back to that setup, obviously we could. I've considered, what we would do here in our church if we were completely 100% forbidden and it became an arrestable offense to gather, which what we just went through with the COVID-19 situation was not as severe as it has been historically in the history of the church. However, if that were to happen, then I would contact individuals and I would say, if your name is from A, B, C, D, E, F, or G, then you're going to be meeting with us on Sunday morning at a different location, maybe at Pastor Bailey's house or one of our deacons' homes, or somewhere here or somewhere there where we could organize a smaller meeting. If that's too many, then we would say, okay, everybody whose name begins with A, B, or C, last name begins with A, B, or C, we're going to be gathering you together in a certain location, and we would try to communicate that location to them, and then D, E, and F, so on and so forth, and I would just be preaching a lot more in different locations without recordings and without public fanfare.
Yeah.
And open and public announcements. So that would be the original arrangement that the church had to live with in the first century. With the freedoms that we've been granted in the United States of America, those days could be coming again, but it would be hard for many, many churches to survive. And I got to tell you, I'm not sure that's a bad thing. I'm not sure that's a bad thing, because there are some churches that are foolish in their doctrine. They're silly with their handling of God's word. And those are the ones that in this whole mess are now being abandoned, because what people are doing now is they're leaving those big mega churches that have the silly messages and the worship experience, quote unquote worship experiences, and they're saying, I can't just live on that, I have to have the truth.
Yeah.
And so they're looking for church. Like our congregation this morning, we were full.
Yeah, we were.
We were really, really blessed with a great crowd this morning. And so the reality is they're looking for the truth in a day when the truth is more needed than ever.
For sure. And we need to remember also the church isn't the building.
Yep.
It's the people. And Jesus says where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, that's where he'll be. So we don't the building. But my question is so I'm a big Second Amendment guy, and I'm big on a lot of my rights that I have, and one of those is my right to gather and go to church. Would I be wrong to physically fight back?
Yeah, it's a tough question. It's a tough question because as a believer, we have the turn the other cheek model that Jesus held up. Yeah, it's interesting this stuff came up because I'm writing a new book right now on the Persecuted Pastor's Manual, and I'm 32,000 words into it, and it's going to wind up being a bigger book than I thought it was going to be. But if we look again historically at how churches have behaved when they were forced to stop, and when I say forced to stop, I'm not just talking about I'll write you a citation. That's not forced. When I say forced to stop, what I'm talking about is the fact that there were people who literally were shoved out of the pulpit. I would just include in my book 2 weeks ago a story of churches in the Sandy Creek area in North Carolina where people were coming and throwing snakes into the windows of the church to frighten the people and scare them away. They were kidnapping pastors and taking them down to the creek and nearly drowning them, mocking baptism. And so that's more what I call persecution. What we've just went through recently is a very mild case, but it will get worse. I do believe it will get worse. I was not surprised. The things that are going on with Jack Trieber and John MacArthur and Paul Chappell and the guys, the faithful men, Gary Scheidbach and the faithful guys out in the state of California. I was not surprised that it escalated to that point, and that's why I had people that tried to tell me. I even had senior pastors who tried to contact me, and they said, "Look, you should not be so stubborn about this having church thing. You need to be." Relax a little bit because this is not persecution. Yeah. It's a health scare. It's a health issue. And the first thing out of my mouth was, this is going to turn into a religious persecution issue. And they didn't believe it then, but now they believe it. They know now that that's exactly where we're headed with this. And I think it'll go there again.
Now,
I really do.
I think this probably ties into the election a little bit because you kind of feel like if, the liberal, they win, they're going to burn America to the ground.
Oh, yeah.
And most importantly for them, churches, because they hate God. But if the right wins, the liberals still burn everything to the ground.
Yeah.
That's the way it seems. So I guess my question to you is, how can we prepare our families for something, I guess kind of in our minds, apocalyptic?
Yeah, and the only way to really prepare for the future is to look at the past. I don't think that the methodology, the technology and all these types of things is going to make persecution a very different experience in the future. But the methodology of it, I don't think is going to change very much. People have basic needs. Need something to eat. They need a roof over their head. In today's world, they may need transportation. A way of buying and selling. And those are the ways that that's where they're going to really hit us where it hurts. And I predict that there'll come a time when they'll make it another health scare in which they say your kids cannot be enrolled in a school unless they've been vaccinated. And for those who do not intend to be vaccinated, they're going to have a really, really hard and difficult choice to make at that point in which they're going to have to say, all right, then my kid is not going to be enrolled in school. Well, then that's going to be interpreted as neglect. If your kid is not being educated, then that's going to be, in the eyes of the state, interpreted as neglect. And that's when they're going to say, maybe your kids would be better off being raised by the state. And that is when, to go back to your question, Jeremy, that's when I have to say, all right, I'm not going to allow that. I'm not going to permit my kids to be taken and become a ward of the state just because of my religious belief here.
Yeah, because I know that God gave us the government. He established it there, and so this is kind of like something I'm struggling with. Is like, how when the rules become sin, how can I rightfully draw the line without because I know if it is persecution, that is something that we were told we were supposed to take, we're supposed to accept. So how do where do I stop with fighting back?
And that's when the apostle said in the book of Acts, it's better to obey God rather than man. Yeah. And so there comes a time, like our brothers and sisters in the state of California right now, when they have to say, boo on what the state says, we're having church because Jesus is the Lord of the church. And so far, the men that I have seen in California have handled this very wisely. They're not being defiant. They're not being openly critical of the state. They're just saying, look, Jesus is our Lord, and we intend to obey him, and you can make whatever decision you need to make, but this is what you can expect from us.
Well, I think there's a difference between being the aggressor and being defensive. defensive.
Yeah.
Because
True.
Jesus does talk about being wise as serpents but harmless as doves. But then he also told his apostles, if you don't have a sword, go buy a sword. And I think there's a huge difference between defending. I've always told, I actually ask my kids probably once a year this question. It's a trick question. I always ask them, how many rights does the Constitution give you? And the answer is 0. The Constitution doesn't give you any rights. It protects the rights that God gave you.
God gave these rights.
It's the inalienable rights.
God-given rights.
So, like Pastor said, my belief personally on the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment is there to protect the other amendments. So if the government comes to a point where they're trying to physically take your liberties or your rights away from you, then you have the right to bear arms and defend yourself.
Well, that's where it's going to start. If they're going to start taking anything, and I hate turning this into like a politic thing, but if they're going to start taking anything, it's going to start with the guns. It's going to start with firearms.
Well, it has to.
And it's just
If
like
they're going to succeed in taking anything else, they have to disarm us first.
That's how Hitler did it. He took the guns first. And that's what people keep asking me every day. They're like, do you think this is going to get any better? Or what's your opinion about this election? Do you think it's going to get better? And I tell them the same thing. I said, I don't think it. I don't personally think I'll ever see it get better. No. I think either one, I'll die, or Christ is going to come.
But the encouraging thing about all of this, if you want to call it encouraging, is that gun sales are like 80% higher.
Yeah.
Right now than they've been. I mean, it is a historical rate that guns are being sold now.
Never seen it like this.
I haven't either. And so, do we have an armed citizenship? Yes.
Yeah.
We do. And those people are, I think, going to be the problem. They're going to be the ones that are going to rise up and say, no, enough is enough.
Yeah.
And you're not taking this away.
That's what I keep telling everybody. I said, look, this is the way I see it. If Trump gets in, it's not going to be any easier. We're still going to see the things we're seeing. We're still going to see riots. We're still keep seeing these gun sales be off the roof. And then I tell them, well, if Biden gets in, I think there'll be a couple months of quietness. Things will go back to a little bit. And then, boom, he's going to start taking away the guns.
I agree.
And then what's next? Freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Well,
which includes...
That's the unique thing about the riots that we're seeing. If you can turn a populace in on itself, then all the government leaders, they just sit back in their comfy little chair and they just watch it unfold. And then they come in after all the smoke is finished rising, like, all right, here's the plan. This is what we're going to do. And that's how they gain the populace that way.
I think that's why Trump hasn't called martial law yet either.
Yeah.
He's going to wait till he gets in, and then he's going to call it. And then that's what I think he's going to do. Because if he calls it now, they're going to see him as a bad guy, and it's going to ruin his chance. They already do see him as a bad guy, but it'll ruin his chance to get in again. So if he gets in, and then
in the second term, he has nothing to lose.
He has nothing to lose because it's his last 4. And then that's when it's just we're going to see a lot worse. A lot worse.
I call him Teflon Don, man, because nothing sticks to him, brother. I mean, they've tried impeachment, they've tried everything, and the COVID thing, man, he just has just shirked that off.
He tried warning it before our country, and they didn't believe him. And now they're blaming him. And I think you just said that that nothing's sticking to him. It kind of reminds me of what you said the other night in Bible college. They were saying how God put him there. It's all a part of God's plan, and this is why nothing's sticking to him, because He's there for a reason.
Yeah, I agree.
It's kind of awesome.
But it could be the darkness right before the dawn.
That's true too.
Because, or vice versa, it could be the sunset right before the night. Because this Supreme Court deal, holy Moses!
I think that's more important than the president.
I did too.
Oh, it is, because it's a lifetime appointment. I mean, I taught high school American government, and the way this thing breaks down is it's almost an infallible system, the way our forefathers set it up. You have terms for the president. 8 years is the total amount of time that he or she can serve. Supreme Court justices are a lifetime appointment. And the Supreme Court in my lifetime has been liberal. Sandra Day O'Connor with
RGB.
Yeah. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We've had extremely left wing. Even Justice Kennedy. They were all very, very left leaning or left wingers. And then in the Obama years, we got Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor, who are both pro-choice, anti-Second Amendment advocates. But then when the scales began to tip was when it was John Roberts, who has really turned out to be a moderate. He's a Bush appointee, but he turned out to be a moderate. But then Trump has appointed 2, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, and they're both, predictable conservatives. Bush put in Samuel Alito also, and he's a predictable conservative. But with this, that's going to give us Alito, conservative, Clarence Thomas, still conservative. That's going to give us Neil Gorsuch, John Roberts. That's going to give us this new lady, I forget her name, that that President Trump is appointing. So the Supreme Court is going to be 6-3,
Turn
and that's
over
huge.
Roe v. Wade.
And they could very possibly turn over the Roe versus Wade ruling back in the 1960s. That's huge.
That's monumentous.
I mean, that is huge. Imagine what our country would be spiritually if we could stop murdering babies. And then also imagine the tailspin that our country may go in if that fight is put up, because I don't think that the Roe v. Wade crowd is not going to go down without a fight.
Yeah, the devil.
You talk about rioting, it'll be real.
Yeah, the devil is not gonna like
he's
that
not
one.
just going to roll over and let us have that one.
Well, here's the thing. None of this can be avoided. Jesus told us this was all coming.
Absolutely.
So what can we do? Be like that church in California.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. These rioters are going out, and some of them don't really care about the cause. They don't care about BLM. They just want to feel important. They want to feel a part of something, and that's where they're getting their joy. That's where they're getting their light, and so they're not seeing the church, because all our churches over here, we're just this quiet little building. And if they hear us, if we can act like that church in California, start showing that light again, I guarantee you, people will start. America will see a revival,
and they are.
Yeah.
You know, we're surrounded by churches in this section of Hillsborough County, and a lot of the churches are still hung at about 40 to 60% of attendance, and our attendance is nearly exactly what it used to be.
Yep.
And I think the reason why is because word is getting out. I mean, we've had people, I'm careful when I say this, but we've had people that are coming to our church that are saying, I'm tired of having my temperature checked and being told I have to wear a mask when I walk into my home church. So they quit. They said, we want to come somewhere where people have common sense and where the Bible is preached. So people are looking for the truth, not just to be preached, but to be enforced and to be, to be realized right before their eyes. And so that's encouraging.
Yes, it is.
That's very, very encouraging.
Because the church is going to see persecution
I
no
think
matter
so.
what. But we need to be that light that people need to see.
Yeah, and this book I'm writing, the first chapter is Operating Among Wolves. The second chapter, I called it Avoiding Persecution When Possible. Just a sensible look at that issue. Third chapter is Holding Nothing Back. And there's a quote here by William Barclay. He said, when Christianity costs something, we're closer than we ever were to the fellowship of Jesus Christ. And if we know the fellowship of his sufferings, we will also know the power of his resurrection. So I am excited about persecution because I think it's going to knock off some of the dead limbs that have accumulated on the church's tree, and we need to have a good storm of persecution to clean up a little bit.
Yeah, to show who's true.
Yeah, so I'm not inciting it and trying to create persecution, but when it comes, historically, it has always had a purifying and a sanitizing effect on the church.
Yeah, I hope Brandon Baptist Tabernacle will stand for the fight. I think we will. God just works so much in this church, more than I've ever seen any.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
it's pretty amazing. We're
too.
very blessed.
Yeah,
Me too.
we are. So, well, I think that'd be a good note to end on if nobody else has anything to add.
Yep.
But I think important thing to remember, for us and for listeners, to keep praying for your church and
go to church.
And go to church. Don't let this virus thing scare you.
No.
And it don't scare me one bit. I know where I'm going if I get it and die.
Exactly.
So, but think we try to keep up with you guys on posting things regularly. You can always find us on Google, Apple, and there's a bunch of other ones. Tons of messages on the church website. Pastor Bailey's Matthew messages have been absolutely amazing these past few months. You can find all of those on there. And in our 2020 Prophecy series, lots of answers and lots of eye-opening things there. So you can find all of those on our church website. But thanks you for listening to another episode of Cherishing Scripture Podcast.